It itches, intensely, unbearably itchy. Every inch of skin on my body, even deep within the skin itself, feels as if countless ants are crawling all over me, an itch that's simply unbearable. Pain, heart-wrenching pain. Every bit of flesh and muscle, even the bones and the very heart, feels as if it's being torn apart. Everywhere is painful. Yet at the same time, Said's entire body felt unbearably hot, so much so that you could even see steam rising off him. Strength far greater than ever before. Energy, endless, even surging and overwhelming energy. It was precisely this strength, this energy, no matter how unbearably itchy or painful, that kept Said from losing consciousness. At this very moment, all he could do was grit his teeth and desperately suppress the scream that had already risen to his throat. At this moment, he didn't even feel the earth trembling. Earthquake. The room swayed, and Gianni's body couldn't help but sway along. But having undergone rigorous training, her reaction was remarkably sharp. Before her body even lost its balance, one of her hands had already gripped the edge of the bed, and in a single flip, she was already lying on the mattress. The lights inside the room hadn't yet gone out, and in the faint glow of the light, Said's contorted, grimacing face suddenly came into Gianni's view. Young master! Young master! My heart gave a sudden jolt. Before I could think twice, seeing that the young master couldn't even utter a word, Gianni swiftly scooped him up and, with several powerful strides, dashed out of the room. During an earthquake, take shelter in an open space. This is what the young master said before. Hugging Said tightly, Gianni quickly dashed to the center of the martial arts training ground, which was also located in the backyard. Young master! Young master, the ground was still shaking. Now was definitely not the time to go looking for a doctor. Gonnie simply sat down on the ground and hugged the young master tightly, as if she could somehow share his pain with him. Gianni, after a long pause, a hoarse voice finally came from the girl's arms. Said. The intense itching and excruciating pain finally began to subside. Sade caught his breath and was finally able to suppress the discomfort enough to force himself to speak, albeit with great difficulty. Young master, how are you doing? What just happened? Are you feeling better now? Don't rush. Take it easy. Said had some difficulty articulating his words, yet there was nothing weak about his voice, quite the opposite, in fact. As he gradually grew accustomed to the pain, he could clearly sense that his body had become noticeably stronger, both in terms of sheer strength and overall physical resilience. For the first time, he felt like he was no longer a pest. This feeling of strength, unprecedented in the past 18 years. Panting heavily, Said continued to endure the itching, burning, and pain while pondering the cause of the changes in his body. Void demon insect hatches. Current status, larval stage. If I remember correctly, the voice that faintly echoed in his ear at the moment his body began to change was precisely these two lines. No, it didn't seem to be coming from right beside his ear after all. Rather, the voice seemed to be ringing directly in his mind, so loud that even the intense pain couldn't make him ignore it. Void demon insect. Hatching. Larval body. Just as Said was secretly pondering what exactly the void demon insect could be, suddenly, his pupils narrowed sharply. A shadow appeared. The shadow was somewhat blurry, yet as soon as it appeared, it instantly enveloped Cade's eyes. In that instant, even the surrounding darkness seemed to grow deeper and more profound. Cade narrowed his eyes slightly and immediately focused his gaze on it, but the next moment. No. A strange light flashed in her eyes, and then. Said closed his eyes. Unlike the darkness of night, that shadow still remains within sight. It's not what the eyes see, it's the heart, or perhaps the soul. A sudden insight emerged, and for a moment, Said even forgot the intense pain in his body, his mind completely focused on this shadow. The shadow quickly became clearer and more distinct. This is a strange space, without sky, without earth, without ocean, even without light or darkness. At a single glance, you can directly sense the void-like essence of this space. In the entire space, the only thing that seemed to have any presence was the central area, the vaguely visible figure in a dark reddish hue. Void demon insect. The name surfaced in Said's mind, and immediately his attention focused on that figure, which quickly became vividly clear. Its silhouette isn't large, about the size of a 3 or 4-month-old puppy. However, this, not large, is only relative to an adult's body size. If we were to compare it to insects, or even newly hatched larvae, the figure was unmistakably a strange insect, entirely blood-red, partly translucent and partly crystalline. Its shape bore some resemblance to that of a worm, with segments arranged one after another. Yet it was clear that the insect's body wall was remarkably tough and resilient. On its head, the strange insect boasts a menacing mouth apparatus, 2 massive mandibles resembling bull horns, and inside its mouth lies a ring of sharp mandibular teeth, utterly ferocious. Above the mouthparts, a pair of dark green eyes. As Saida Guanmu looked over, these eyes were meeting Saida Guanmu's gaze. Cold and chilling, yet bloodthirsty and hungry, and even more greedy, these eyes are filled with endless cruelty. But gaze met the eyes, yet Said showed absolutely no fear. A strange sense of connection seemed to exist between him and the bizarre insect. A feeling that words can hardly capture. Somehow it feels like dependence, yet also like attachment, and even like oneness. At that moment, a luminous curtain appeared above the strange insect, and Kate's gaze immediately turned toward it. On the light screen was a row upon row of characters he'd never seen before, but when Kate glanced at them, he somehow miraculously understood their meaning. Void demon insect, unnamed, larval form, summoning level, attribute traits, skill abilities, energy pool. Void, this must be its species. But this unnamed, could it be that I'm supposed to give it a name? With a touch of eccentricity and a hint of cautious curiosity toward the unknown and mysterious, Kate's gaze tentatively focused on the word unnamed. Soon after, those few characters began to enlarge and flicker. It should be fine, but what name should we give it? Said pondered for a moment, and soon, a name popped into his mind. Name it, Vegas. Responding to this thought, the words on the light screen flickered. Behind Void Demon Insect, the previously unmarked, unnamed, suddenly transformed into Vegas. Said's full name is Said V. Gas. V is the baronial surname Rive, and Gas is the family name. This mysterious, bizarre insect will be named Vegas precisely because of its remarkable, almost telepathic connection, a bond that feels utterly seamless and unified. After naming the Void Demon Insect, Said turned his gaze toward the rear once more. Larval form, no reaction. This is probably just the current growth stage of the Void Demon Insect. Summon, compared to other places, these two characters carry a somewhat darker tone, almost like grey. Cade's gaze fixed upon them, and a message instantly leapt into his mind. Insufficient magical energy, cannot summon. Magic energy. Insufficient. Hesitant, amazed, and full of anticipation, yet also burdened with lingering concerns, Said continued to gaze backward, carrying this complex mix of emotions. Level, LV0, should mean it's just hatched. LV0 is perfectly normal. However, right after LV0, there's also a grey upward pointing arrow symbol. As Said focused his mental energy on it, 2 more messages immediately popped up. Blood energy is insufficient, cannot upgrade. 15 units of primary blood energy are currently required. Blood power, primary blood power. It's another new concept, and it's more specific than summoning requires. Continue onward. The attributes column displays quite a lot of information. When you click on attributes, 4 branches immediately appear: strength, 1, agility, 0.5, constitution, 1.5, and magic, 0.1. Strength, agility, and physical fitness, these 3 are relatively easier to understand. As for magic, Said glanced again at the summon above. Surely, the magical energy required for the summoning had something to do with this very magic, didn't it? However, without any comparison, Said still couldn't gauge whether these 4 attributes, void, magic, insect, and demon, represented strength or weakness. So after taking just a brief look, he turned his attention back to what lay ahead. After attributes comes talents. When you click on talents, 2 branches pop up, one is symbiosis, and the other is digestion. When I clicked on the talent branch again, there was actually an introduction as well. Symbiosis. 1. The void demon insect and its host coexist symbiotically. 2. As the void demon insect grows and evolves, it also promotes the growth and evolution of its host. Provides the host with a passive 10% attribute bonus, a passive 10% talent bonus, a passive 10% feat bonus, and a passive 10% seal bonus. Not upgradable. Upon reaching this point, Sade's heart suddenly felt enlightened. The demonic insect that manifests within his heart is truly capable of influencing him in the real world. If he's not mistaken, the dramatic changes occurring in his body in the real world must be related to this symbiotic talent. The magical insect hatched and began to coexist with him, further boosting his physical growth. That intense itching and excruciating pain must be part of the growth process itself, while his increased strength is likely due to the attribute bonuses provided by this symbiotic relationship. From this, Sade further associated it with his own ailment, the fact that for 18 years he'd been born with a frail constitution, easily exhausted even after minimal physical activity. Could it perhaps be due to these void demon insects? Incubation requires energy. Thinking of this, for a moment even Sade couldn't help but secretly curse under his breath. Still, his mindset was far more mature and rational than that of most people his age. Moreover, the matter was already in the past. No matter how much he might wish it could be changed, it was impossible to alter anything now. And with the hatching of the void demon insect, there was even a chance that he might one day return to the path of knighthood, a path he'd already given up on. So very quickly, Sade suppressed these emotions and turned his gaze once again toward what lay ahead. Digestion LV0. The void demon insect possesses powerful digestive capabilities, currently boosted by 50%. Although both are talent branches, digestion and symbiosis differ significantly. Symbiosis comes with a prompt indicating that it cannot be upgraded, whereas after digestion level 0, there's a grey arrow. Reach the upper limit, your talent level cannot exceed the void demon insect's level. Obviously, the digestive talent can be upgraded, though this upgrade is limited by the void demon insect's own level. The 10% bonus to innate talent provided by symbiosis probably corresponds to this digestive ability, but 50% of 10% doesn't seem like much at all. After a moment of hesitation, Sade continued to look ahead. Young Master. Master Sade. At this moment, the tremors of the earth gradually subsided. After suppressing their fear, several servants from the Baron's residence hurried over toward the backyard. Someone's coming. If the incident involving the lemongrass powder really is connected to Evan, with this earthquake happening, he'd surely take the opportunity to send someone over to spy on us. Disturbed by the servants' shouts, Sade's concentration wavered for a moment. The shadowscape and the magical insect's figure quickly grew blurry, then soon vanished completely. Once attention is scattered and shifted, the connection will be severed, and will need to be re-established. As soon as the thought occurred, Sade once again focused his mind and began to concentrate deeply. Void demon insect. Vegas. The shadow should come to life. As expected. By this point, the intense pain had already subsided considerably. Sade tentatively clenched his fists and feet, now he could bear it. Still, he wasn't in a hurry to get up. Instead, in a hoarse voice, he whispered softly into the girl's ear, "Joanne, if anyone asks later, just say that I've been feeling unwell all day today." Like this? Joanne's heart stirred, and without asking further why, she simply wiped away the wetness from Sade's face with tender care. Lowering her voice as well, she said, "Young master, how are you feeling now?" "I'm fine, just pretending to be sick." Sade blinked and gave a slight smile. "I won't say a word for a bit, just handle them yourself. Later, our elder sister might come over too." As he spoke, seeing Joanne nod, Sade simply closed his eyes and, in his mind, once again summoned the name, Vegas. The shadow reappears. After talent comes skill. Skill, Bloodlust Fury. Bloodthirsty Fury, activates blood energy, greatly enhancing the demon insect's power while simultaneously reducing its rationality and causing its emotions to spiral out of control. Within a given unit of time, the amount of strength gained is affected by the consumption of blood energy. 2. The upper limit of strength gain is influenced by physical constitution. 3. It can be applied to the host. There's only one skill, but as soon as he clicked on it and glanced briefly at it, Said's gaze couldn't help but light up. Can act on the host. Although restricted by his physical constitution and thus unable to master the secret arts, as the son of a baron, his horizons were certainly not limited in the least. As far as Saida understands, knights are knights precisely because they, together with the nobility, form the ruling class at the principality. This is not only due to their extraordinary strength and physical prowess, but also because knights have mastered a superior energy known as fighting chi. Although the name, Duki, has long been overused, it's probably the most common one anyway. After all, it's just a name, and I can't be bothered to think up anything else. This high-level energy can be converted into vast amounts of physical stamina, granting extraordinary endurance in combat. It can also be unleashed in an instant, allowing one to tap into strength far beyond their usual capacity for short periods of time. To some extent, the bloodthirsty burst of the demon insect shares certain similarities with the knight's burst of combat energy. This skill can be applied to the host, effectively allowing K to master the knight's innate secret technique ahead of time. Of course, this innate technique might be a weakened version, or even come with side effects. Say didn't forget about reduced rationality and emotional outbursts, but he understood even better that, despite the side effects, this skill could absolutely turn the tide in critical moments. Bloodlust and frenzy must be experienced, and adapted to, early on. But the key, after all, is blood energy, as the thought flashed through his mind, Said's gaze. It quickly shifted to the very bottom, energy pool. Energy pool, the void demon insect's body is a naturally occurring energy reservoir. Tap on the energy pool, and after an introductory message, two blurred patterns appear. On the left is a humanoid figure, vaguely resembling Cade's body. Most of this pattern is filled with blood-red color, giving it a rich and full appearance. On the right is an insect-shaped figure, resembling a simplified depiction of the void demon insect. It also has a blood-red hue, though in this demon insect, the blood-red color occupies only a very small portion. Additionally, there's a note on one side, blood energy pool, primary blood energy, 1. And between these two patterns, there's a light ray connected by a arrow. This is. Do I have to feed my body's energy to it in order to replenish my blood energy? However, can the blood of the demon insect also be used to replenish oneself? As a thought flashed through his mind, Said completely ignored Gianni's instructions to the servants about tidying up the mansion and instead tentatively tapped the arrow on the right side. The blood color on the left began to decline rapidly, while the blood color on the right started to rise in response, but at an extremely slow pace. It took roughly 1/5 of the decline on the left before the blood value on the right finally showed any change at all. Elemental blood energy, 1.1. At this point, Saida could already clearly feel the changes in his body. Just a moment ago, his energy had been unprecedentedly abundant. Now, it felt as if he'd returned to his usual state, just after a full meal. Keep charging. As the blood level dropped to nearly half, the magic insect blood pool value jumped to 1.2. At this moment, Said involuntarily began to pant, as if he'd just come through a fierce battle and was utterly exhausted. Next, try it, but in reverse. 0.1, the humanoid's blood color immediately increases significantly. Again 0.1, the blood color returns to its original state. The transfer of blood energy shows almost no loss. My physical fitness is still too poor, even if I ignore the consequences and convert it all into primary blood energy, it still falls far short of 1. However, if you maintain sufficient reserves over the long term and replenish them in reverse when needed, whether for cultivating secret arts or engaging in combat with others, your endurance will surely surpass anyone's wildest imagination. Moreover, Vegas is no longer absorbing energy on its own. Said's eyes finally opened. Now that the magical insect was no longer actively drawing energy from his body, the biggest obstacle to his swordsmanship practice and secret arts cultivation had been removed. Not only was the obstacle gone, but with the magical insect's various abilities providing assistance, his rate of progress would surely far exceed that of ordinary people. Although starting cultivation at the age of 18 is somewhat late, the path of the knight is not necessarily without hope. Thus, some of his previous plans will also need to be appropriately revised. The establishment of the intelligence network must continue and even be strengthened. Before, I wasn't qualified to wield the power of the military, but now things are different. Once I've gained sufficient strength and can continue to improve, my mother won't stop me from forming and commanding an armed force. With military power in hand and the ability to immerse myself in the intelligence network, then, Said's thoughts raced rapidly, pondering the direction his future path should take, but one particular thought remained buried deep within his heart. What on earth is the origin of this magical insect? When is it? And why would it coexist with him? This mystery, hovering between the illusory and the earthly, is something that even if the Baron were a silver knight, would still be absolutely impossible to achieve. At this moment, another set of footsteps echoed from outside the martial arts training ground, mingled with some voices speaking softly. "Madam, watch your step. Madam, over here. Edith is here. I really hope it's not you." As Said's intention solidified, the blood-colored figure in the blood pool rapidly sank to half its original height. His face was pale, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Said in a hoarse voice, "Gianni, help me up." Although all the servants had been sent away by Gianni, several more braziers had been placed on the martial arts training ground, so there was no chill at all, and the lighting was quite ample. As Said leaned against Gianni to stand up, Edith arrived over there as well. Dressed in casual clothes and boots, Edith hurried along, clearly just as startled by the earthquake. Her waist-length hair was still somewhat disheveled, giving her an air of fragility. However weak she might be, Edith immediately became anxious as soon as she saw Cade's appearance. Said, "You're already in this state, why haven't you let anyone notify me yet? Gianni, how do you take care of your master's young master? Don't you know you should call a doctor?" Edith was furious, and no wonder she was angry. Not only was Said's face deathly pale, but he was also soaking wet. If it hadn't been for the fact that Gianni was covered in mud and dirt while her younger brother still looked relatively clean, Edith would have begun to suspect that this maid might have ulterior motives. "Sis, I'm fine, just a little thing. It was me who asked her not to go out." Said's voice was still hoarse, weak and lacking energy. "This looks fine so far. If Mom finds out you've done this, I'll never be able to face her again." Edith let out a huff of annoyance as she took hold of Sid's other hand and said to the person behind her, "Mr. Nelson, would you be so kind as to send someone to fetch Dr. Benjamin? I'm not very comfortable with Sid's condition." Edith didn't come alone, she was accompanied by a maid and bodyguards. However, the fact that Edith was so polite, even respectful, toward Nelson clearly indicated that Nelson wasn't one of the bodyguards. Nielsen, the chief steward of Viscount Castle and the most trusted man of Viscount Warren, could be said to have raised all three of the Viscount's sons. "I'm fine, just a bit of stomach discomfort. It's probably something wrong with the milk I drank this morning." "You've been putting it off for too long, haven't you?" Said muttered under his breath without changing his expression, then naturally turned his gaze toward Nelson. He deliberately brought up the issue of milk and nodded weakly in greeting to the old man. "Don't worry, madam. I'll have Benjamin come over here first." At this time, the doctor is undoubtedly the busiest, but as soon as old Nelson spoke up, Benjamin, no matter how busy he was, made sure to come over here first. After comforting Edith, old Nelson turned to Sid again, adopting an equally respectful demeanor, showing neither the slightest hint of contempt nor rudeness. "From now on, I'll personally take charge of arranging young Master Sid's milk. There are also several cows in the castle, and I'll bring the freshest milk to the young master every day." "Then thank you, Grandpa Nelson." Said's lips twitched as he forced a faint smile. Nielsen the butler bowed slightly and took his leave. The earthquake had almost subsided, and Edith and Gonny helped Sid walk inside the house. As he carried the glow of the fire, a flicker of shadow and light crossed Said's eyes. Things seemed to be even more serious than he had anticipated. Old Nelson actually came along with Edith to visit him. Old Nelson's involvement was no small matter. If he hadn't had some ulterior motive, would he really have put aside his duties at the castle and come all the way over here just because of a minor earthquake? However, if it's old Nelson who's involved in this. A chill ran through Said's heart. He couldn't help but feel that even Evan, or perhaps even Andrew, would find it difficult to get old Nelson to turn against him. In a matter of this magnitude, old Nelson would listen only to one person's orders. Viscount Warren. But Viscount Warren is still on the front lines in Lüneburg, so if the person behind the scenes is him, what kind of matter could possibly prompt him to travel thousands of miles just to issue such an order? Said took a deep breath. At least they still have some scruples, they only strike behind the scenes. Moreover, they probably haven't yet taken him very seriously. After all, he's just an 18-year-old boy who's always been frail and sickly, with little contact with the outside world and an appearance that suggests he's inexperienced in the ways of the world. Otherwise, old Nelson would never have been exposed so easily. First, pretend to be sick. Once the floodwaters recede, we'll find an opportunity to return to Abaddon. Said quickly suppressed all his emotions and even channeled more of his physical energy into the magical insect blood pool, making himself appear even weaker. As for faking illness, his ability in that area is truly exceptional. Dr. Benjamin arrived quickly and couldn't spot any flaws. He prescribed some medicine, emphasized that she must get plenty of rest, and then hurried off again. At noon on the second day, Luo Wen quietly came to the mansion alone and reported some matters again. Said continues to be ill, with no signs of improvement. By the third day, the floodwaters had finally receded considerably, and most of Lucan's ground was once again bathed in sunlight. Just as Sid was pondering whether to make an excuse about worrying about his mother and prepare to return to his territory, a skinny horse, splashing through the mud-covered ground, charged toward the Viscount's castle.